On the morning of June 30th, 1908, something exploded above the forests of central Siberia with the force of 1,000 Hiroshima bombs. 80 million trees fell. No one has ever found what caused it. The blast occurred at 17 minutes past 7 local time above the Podkamenaya Tunguska River, a stretch of taiga so remote that the nearest settlement lay hundreds of kilometers away. The explosion carried a force estimated between 5 and 10 megatons. The Hiroshima bomb released roughly 15 kilotons. Tunguska was hundreds of times more powerful. It remains the largest impact event in recorded human history, and yet there is no crater. Eyewitness accounts describe a column of bluish-white light moving across the northern sky, bright enough to rival the sun. Then came the flash, a burst of heat so intense that people 60 kilometers away felt their skin burn. Seconds later, the shockwave knocked people off their feet, shattered windows, and threw a man from his chair on a trading post porch. The sound was not a single explosion, but a series of detonations rolling across the sky. The shock traveled far beyond Siberia. Barographs in England recorded atmospheric pressure disturbances. Seismic stations across Europe picked up vibrations consistent with a large-scale impact event. In the days that followed, night skies over Europe and Western Russia glowed with silvery luminescence. People in London could read newspapers outdoors at midnight. Something had injected fine particulate matter into the upper atmosphere, scattering sunlight around the curve of the Earth. The scale was enormous. The location was nearly impossible to reach. 19 years passed before anyone came to look. Leonid Kulik, a Soviet mineralogist, assembled a small expedition in 1927 and pushed into the Tunguska region along river routes and reindeer trails. What he found at the epicenter was not what he expected. Trees lay flattened in vast radial lines across 2,150 square kilometers, trunks pointing outward from a common center. At ground zero, some trees still stood. They were stripped of branches and bark, reduced to scorched vertical poles. The shockwave had arrived from directly above, pressing straight down. The pattern implied an airburst. Something had exploded in the atmosphere, kilometers above the forest floor. Kulik searched for a crater. He searched for meteorite fragments. He returned in 1928, again in 1930, and again in 1939. Each expedition was more thorough. Each produced the same result. No crater, no fragments, no physical remains of any kind that could be linked to the impacting body. This is the fact that has defined every attempt to explain the Tunguska event for more than a century. Something released the energy equivalent of a nuclear weapon and then vanished without a trace. The leading hypothesis is a thermal airburst. An object roughly 50 to 80 meters in diameter, about the size of a large building, entered the atmosphere at tens of kilometers per second. Friction and pressure heated it rapidly. At an altitude of 5 to 10 kilometers, the stress exceeded the body's structural limits, and it exploded, a catastrophic fragmentation that converted kinetic energy into heat, light, and a colossal pressure wave. The object never reached the ground because it ceased to exist before it got there. This explanation is elegant. It is consistent with the radial tree fall pattern, the scorched central trunks, the absent crater, and the recorded shockwave data. Computer simulations modeling high-velocity atmospheric entry reproduce the observed damage with reasonable accuracy. There is a problem. If a 50 to 80 meter rock exploded in the atmosphere, it should have left debris. The Chelyabinsk meteor of 2013, a much smaller event, scattered recoverable fragments across the region. Tunguska was orders of magnitude more powerful. After more than 100 years of searching, no fragment of confirmed extraterrestrial origin has been recovered. Small spherules of silicate and magnetite found in the soil have been proposed as ablation products, but their composition is ambiguous, suggestive, not conclusive. In 2013, a team of Italian researchers proposed that Lake Cheko, a small body of water roughly 8 kilometers from the epicenter, might be an impact crater formed by a surviving fragment. They analyzed sediment cores from the lakebed and argued the profile was consistent with a sudden, violent origin in the early 20th century. The claim drew significant attention and significant pushback. Subsequent studies challenged the sediment dating, noted that the lake appears in regional surveys predating 1908, and argued its basin geometry is more consistent with thermokarst processes, the natural collapse of permafrost, than with hypervelocity impact. The hypothesis remains unresolved, but the balance of evidence has shifted against it. A cometary origin has been proposed as an alternative. A comet, composed primarily of ice, dust, and volatile compounds, would disintegrate more completely during an airburst, leaving less recoverable material than a rocky body. This would explain the absence of fragments. It would also account for the anomalous atmospheric brightness observed across Europe, as cometary debris injected into the upper atmosphere could scatter sunlight in precisely the way reported. The difficulty is that cometary composition cannot be confirmed without direct samples, and the atmospheric data can be explained by other mechanisms. The real problem is not that the hypotheses are weak. The real problem is that the strongest hypothesis predicts physical evidence that has never been found. The absence of fragments is not a minor gap. It is the central unresolved feature of the event. Every model that explains the blast must also explain why nothing survived. None has done so to universal satisfaction. The object that exploded above Siberia was, by astronomical standards, small, 50 to 80 meters. Millions of near-Earth objects occupy that size range, and the vast majority remain untracked. Current planetary defense surveys focus on larger bodies above 140 meters. Something Tunguska-sized could approach Earth with little or no warning. It nearly happened in 2013, when the Chelyabinsk meteor arrived from the direction of the sun, completely undetected until it was already burning through the atmosphere. Tunguska struck one of the most sparsely populated regions on the planet. No confirmed human casualties were recorded. If the object had arrived 4 hours and 47 minutes later, a difference so small it barely registers against the timescales of orbital mechanics, the rotation of the Earth would have placed St. Petersburg directly beneath it. A city of more than 1 million people. 5 to 10 megatons, no warning. The forest has grown back. The evidence survives in soil samples, century-old photographs, and barograph traces in European archives. Something crossed from space into the atmosphere on a June morning, released more energy than any weapon that would exist for decades after, and left nothing behind. The question has remained open for over 100 years. Nothing has closed it.